I'm Stuart Cameron. Welcome to the Friday Rugby Show. It's the last one of the season. That means that, of course, Jedforest will play out the Kings of the Sevens. That's happening tomorrow at Riverside Park. And with me to discuss that and various other items of information, it's Stuart McFarlane. Well, Stuart, we have to talk about the Rugby Sevens statement last night, which came in from Scottish Rugby Union, saying that they have had a good discussion, and because of positive results this year and the heritage and a few other reasons, they've decided not to disband Scotland Sevens, which was all the talk. They're going to be continuing. Obviously, there's got to be a lot of discussion as to what sort of format it's going to take, what they're going to be doing, the structure, etc. But it has to be good news, and you have to say power to the people.
Absolutely. I think it was a short statement, about 3 paragraphs in length, and there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered, but I suppose it's a statement that allows them a bit extra time to look at the direction that they plan to go in now. And I think it's, as you say, it's down to the sort of the outcry from a large percentage of the rugby population in Scotland that have very much got Sevens at their heart and think that the heritage of Sevens, when you look at Melrose and the emergence of Sevens in Melrose, you look at the influence that 2 Scots had in the creation of the Hong Kong Sevens, Murrayfield being a host to a first international Sevens tournament in 73 as part of their centenary, and then 20 years later with the first World Cup. I mean, there's so much heritage there that was taken into account, I think, by a lot of supporters when they were making their own thoughts known quite publicly at times. But, there's a lot of detail that hasn't emerged yet. The thought processes of a lot of people involved, we don't know at this stage, because it did look as if it was completely dead in the water 3 or 4 days ago. And there has been a turning of the tide, so to speak, in this statement that was released last night to say that there is going to be a future. But how it will shape up, whether it will be a part-time development squad, whether it will remain full-time, how they propose to resource it, I think that's been an issue that has maybe been brushed under the carpet, possibly ignored, possibly only discussed by a chosen few for a long time now. And I think it's finally coming to a head.
Also, some high-profile journalists, people like Ian Morrison and Rob Robertson in particular, have really gone on board and said, look, this just can't be allowed to happen. Rob Robertson also mentioning about the scandal, if you like, of the fact that the SAU treated the players that way and didn't mince his words. And all this has really kind of gathered momentum. And all of a sudden, you have to say, it does make the SAU look a little bit silly.
I think there's an ownership issue with a lot of the people that have come forward, and I think they really feel that Scotland still has ownership of the Sevens game because of the tournaments we talked about and the heritage we touched on there in the past. And OK, you look at the results on the pitch and you look at the structure in terms of the last 20-25 years. We mentioned that tournament in 1993, the first of the World Cup tournaments that are played in a sort of 4-year cycle, like the 15s tournament. They'll be coming up again in September. And yes, OK, you point at performances. Where have we really performed well in the last 20 years or so? And there's only been, a clutch of perhaps really good performances within tournaments. So I think that is some way short of where we need to be. And that's perhaps been a reason why people have identified this as a weak area and said, can we let this go? Dare we let this go? And I think the upshot is no, you can't, because of the heritage. And I think people accept that performances must improve, but to simply do away with it altogether is out of the question.
I mean, I was out at Hong Kong and saw China beat us. We've been beaten by Germany. We've been beaten by Belgium. And a couple of years ago, we were seeing Facebook and social media saying, well, let's do away with the Sevens because this is a total embarrassment. But putting that aside, it's funny how it's now happened when we've been seeing new players coming in, results a lot better than they were, and then having this hanging over the players' heads that, this could be the last season.
Without any doubt, there's some green shoots in terms of a recovery. I mean, you go back to the Commonwealth Games, that was a very frustrating watch for a lot of really passionate Sevens supporters, that we had a clutch of very good individual players, some coming straight in, parachuted straight in with a lot of 15s experience and practically no sevens experience by their own admission. And they fell short of what the crowd were really hoping and expecting. And, the crowd were there because they were caught up in the whole Commonwealth Games atmosphere and went to Ibrox and wanted to say that they'd been part of the Commonwealth Games. And Rugby Sevens at Ibrox, without question, benefited from the wider competition of the Commonwealth Games. But on the pitch, you could look at it and say, well, actually, again, it was somewhat disappointing. Perhaps since then, though, there has been greater improvement on the part, but it's got to continue to build. And, of course, the players and the coaching staff, there has to be a settled structure where everybody's heading in the one direction, that there's clear understanding, there's a clear plan going forward, there is a budget set aside, and everybody is very much thinking along the same lines, rather than this constant, it's almost been ever decreasing circles. You feel that the coaches and the players are going round in circles season after season, but the problem is, as results and performances continue to be less than what is expected of them and continue to disappoint, that circle's getting smaller to the point where suddenly, does it continue or not? And that's where we are at the moment.
It's all really come from the IRB's decision to drop Scotland from the IRB Sevens, or the World Rugby Sevens as it's known now, circuit. And, to a lot of people, it's kind of like, the SRU throwing the toys out of the pram after that decision was made, because there's no doubt they were bitterly disappointed with that. And we've seen this season that, they've come up with a sellout crowd at Scotstoun, vast improvement over the past 4 years. How they've done it, I don't know. We must give credit, of course, to the marketing department. But, a lot of questions being asked, well, if they did it this year, why wasn't it done for the last 4 years?
But again, perhaps because they tried to build on the marketing post-Commonwealth Games and get people along to a smaller stadium. I mean, the capacity is vastly reduced on Ibrox, which in both days had in excess of 40,000 there for the 2 days of competition. So again, I think they were able to feed on the enthusiasm for the support in the same city just less than a year later, about eight months or so later. I think that may have been a factor. But you touched on the whole IRB and Glasgow perhaps being replaced by Paris. Again, there's no divine right for Scotland to be part of the IRB Sevens season after season, and I think that the wider IRB as a business, as an organisation, are looking at other nations. Paris, I think, were last involved in 2006, so some do drift in and others drift out. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I don't know if there is a settled core of nations that will always feature regardless. That would be interesting to know if that was the case. But again, it's a wake-up call. And because we've talked many times about the heritage, it's very much now about the here and now and the future. If the organisers of the IRB Sevens, the World Sevens Series, feel that they do require, or the structure does require some freshening up, then Scotland have to make sure that they can offer something new and something better than before when the opportunity comes around again for them to be considered.
And the big question is, would Melrose be involved?
Well, that is a good question. That's a very good question. That's a question that's, times has been the elephant in the room in terms of would Melrose host two major tournaments at the Green Yards in the one season. Of course, they have their own tournament, which is set in stone. It's one of the few border sporting events that's televised live across terrestrial television. The Tour of Britain's been one of the only few others that over the years have had some live and some significant television coverage. I don't see why not in terms of its ability to host a tournament, and I think that there's sufficient space around about, because now it's not just about a tournament, it's about the pulling in the crowd and entertaining the crowd, and it's the added extras. I think now, Melrose admit themselves, gone are the days where supporters come along, pay their money, go in, stand, watch the tournament, maybe have a pint and go away home. There has to be much more now to attract the crowds. And that was very evident at Ibrox and has been quite evident at Murrayfield in 15s and club games and internationals and obviously in the sevens, even pre the Scotstoun venue as the tournament. So I think that Melrose certainly offers something unique. I have to say, I think there'll be a lot of people within the IRB circuit that would like to see Melrose being included because of that unique element.
Let's move on to the Kings of the Sevens. It's Jedforest tomorrow, always a popular event, but it's going to be a great climax, even though obviously we know the result that Gala will be crowned Kings of the Sevens. But what I like about Jedforest is that they seed their draw. They have a format where they take the 4 best teams, separate them up so they can all meet potentially in the semi-final if that goes to form. They have a Borders versus City element to it, which I think is always good because you've always got Borders' interest in the tie.
Oh, indeed. And I think that you touched on this already, how they structure the draw. I think that is important. I think that keeps the interest there. I think what is also important is Gala, yes, they won the Kings of the Sevens now some time ago. What's been a good stimulant for the Sevens game in the Borders this season again is of the 9 tournaments so far, you've had 5 different winners. And of course, Glasgow Warriors picking up the Ladies' Trophy at Melrose, Ladies' Cup. So that has been, I think, important. Jed, of course, one of the winners, a recent winner, winning at Selkirk as well. So there has been this spread of success across border clubs. Added to that, Watsonians, Edinburghs, Kelso and Selkirk have been competitive. They've been in and around semi-finals and finals. And you fancy that one of those teams on their day could maybe go just that little bit further and really put in a challenge if they were to make a final and compete. We'll think of Watsonians going to extra time against Gala at Peebles. And the Melrose Hoyt final last Sunday there was fantastic, was very dramatic. So there's been a lot of excitement.
So Gala out in front, 66 points. That is the second highest total ever in Kings of the Sevens history. They can go in the 70s for the first time tomorrow as well if they have a good performance. Obviously, Melrose 43 points along with Hoyk on 43 points. Jedforest on 41 as well. So a big battle for second and cash prizes at stake.
There is this sort of mini battle between those 3 sides that you mentioned, and I think that they want the one-upmanship on the other 2, whichever team does finish in outright second place. So it will be interesting to see how things develop tomorrow, and you can get some of the very best Sevens rugby played at Jed, which is all credit to the players, given, as we mentioned already, it does bring the curtain down on a long 15 season, followed by 10 tournaments, this being the 10th and final Kings tournament. So for the players to go back to the well and get a bit more and produce at the Riverside tournament, I think says a lot for their own desire and their own determination to keep going right to the end.
So Melrose, of course, they've been in the mix at the final at the Jed Sevens for the last 6 years, always been in the final. We've had Gala, who've had 3 wins, 4 runners-up, so they've made 7 finals this year. Are they going to make an 8th and go out with a bang? It's all going to be excellent stuff to watch, and we're looking forward to it, and it's happening from 1:30 tomorrow, and Stuart McFarlane will be there. And who's your buddy this week?
Well, Dale, and possibly Bruce as well. It could be a grand old party in the commentary box, could you imagine?
That is it for the Friday Rugby Show, and thanks so much indeed to Stuart McFarlane for joining us. But that's your rugby for tonight.